So before I begin, let me just make a quick comment about this image. I love this image. And what I noticed about this particular image as I was working on this talk was, if you look at this young boy and young girl, they're both receiving, but they're also both giving. And it creates a really interesting, harmonious circle, right? And this image really spurred me as I was working on this talk today. So I just wanted to comment on that before I begin. But I'm going to start off with a little background, a little story about what I'm here to talk with you today. So I'm going to start with a question. As a creative person, who here would like to be a more generous creative? Just raise your hand. Okay. All right, so now I'm also going to ask the opposite question. Who here would actually rather not be more generous? Would anyone actually embarrass themselves by raising their hands? Okay, what does that tell us? That's a really curious thing, because what it tells us is we actually all want to be more generous people. It's something that we intuitively believe and know, right? I find this so curious. We all want to be more generous, so what stops us? Okay, I want to explore that. So let me go back and take you back to 1994. So some 20 years ago is when I started my production company, which means for 20 years now as an entrepreneur, as a creative, I haven't had a boss. I've been in business that long. And when a lot of people hear that, they marvel. You know, they ask me, wow, that's incredible. Joel, what's the secret? And I guess the things that I tell them really aren't all that profound. You know, I say things like, step up, do what you love, always be learning. So as you might imagine, after 20 years, when you hit a milestone like that, you become rather reflective, right? And the funny thing is, I think I realized that I'm actually kind of wrong about that secret, right? I realized that I actually know a lot of people that are stepping up. I know a lot of people that are doing what they love. I know a lot of people that are always learning, but they're not all that happy, they're not all that successful, okay? So that actually reminds me of somebody, and that's me. The first 10 years of my career in running my own production company, things were going okay. I mean, we're plugging along okay, but I had this nagging sense that things could be a lot more exciting, a lot more interesting. And I didn't know what to do about that, right? But then, right around the 10-year mark, something happened. And as I was looking back, what happened was, right around the 10-year mark, I started connecting with a bunch of amazing, creative people, really successful people, really happy people, okay? These people were like magnets, and I couldn't get enough of them. I just loved being around them. Some of these folks were clients, some of them were other entrepreneurs, some of them were even competitors of mine. And you know what? They each had something in common. Generosity. For this, I loved these people, right? I couldn't get enough of them. They were very generous to me with their time. They gave me their attention. They gave me their knowledge. They gave me connections. They brought me into opportunities. How many of us know a creative person like that that's inspired us, right? Yeah, a lot of you. A lot of you. So here's a story of one, a friend of mine, I'll call him Daniel, that I met about 10 years ago, and Daniel and I hit it off from the very start. We had a lot in common. We started to share work together. We started to inspire each other. We would share reference. We would be working on a pitch and say, hey, what do you think of this? Is this going to sell? Is this going to work? We started mingling at industry events in Denver. We even started climbing mountains together and skiing together and other things like that, right? So here's the twist. You see, Daniel and I were actually rivals. He worked at my fiercest competitor across town. And people around town, when they would see us hanging out and socializing, they would come to me and they would say, you guys are like bitter enemies, right? And of course, we weren't. We sort of took pride in proving everyone wrong, right? We had this mission. We said, we're going to shrug this off. We're going to prove that we can be competitive, generous, and successful, hopefully, all at the same time. Today, Daniel's still a really good friend of mine, and he's a very successful person. Now, when you look at successful people, tell me if you think the way I think at times. And that is, we often think, well, why wouldn't these people be super generous? They're so successful, right? They just get a give out of all that success and that abundance. You might think to yourself, yeah, if I was that successful, I'd be that generous too. I'd give my time, my attention, be very giving and so forth. But then I came across this concept the last year, actually when I was preparing for my talk last year at Motion, called the generosity paradox. And it was this really interesting idea, and it said this. It says, generosity is paradoxical. Those who give receive back in turn. By spending ourselves for others' well-being, we enhance our own. In letting go of some of what we own, we better secure our own lives. By giving ourselves away, we ourselves move towards greater flourishing. This is not only a philosophical or religious teaching, it is a sociological fact. And this was from a research project done at the University of Notre Dame. So I began thinking and actually researching and observing, looking for the generosity paradox in real life. And apparently that secret I was telling you about, I did indeed have it all wrong. You see, it never occurred to me that the question might not be, aren't these amazing, creative people generous because they're so successful? The actual question is, are these amazing, creative people successful because they're so generous? Okay, maybe I had it backwards. And I think this is the crux of the paradox, right? It's an incredible theory. And I think intuitively we all know it's true. But if it is true, what stops us from acting like it's true? All right, so in order to answer that question, I had to ask myself a tough question and look in the mirror and say, well, what about me? Have I been a generous person? I want to be more generous. I want to give more. I want to be more, pay it forward and give back to the people that have, helped me and pay it forward to the people that are coming behind me. And when I look back, I noticed that there was clearly a very special and select group of people to which I had invested a lot of time and a lot of attention and invited them into opportunities. And I felt I could honestly answer that question, towards these people, yes, I have been pretty generous, okay? But to whom, right? Who was that group? Well, surprise. Aha, okay, what's going on here? All those amazing, generous people that I told you about that had such a great impact on my career were the people that I had invested so much in. So what does that tell us about the secret? So this actually reminds me of one of my favorite quotes from Zig Ziglar. Maybe some of you have heard this one. You can have everything in life you want if you will just help enough other people get what they want. Okay, so is this the real secret? Maybe. All right, so let's briefly go examine generosity, all right, based on some of the research that I did, and let's see what we can discover. Arguably the most influential man in history had this to say. We all know this one. It is better to give than receive, okay? And this is a concept that's been handed down to us through the ages, and it's a major tenet of all major world religions, right? So to compare that against a modern perspective, I reached out to a bunch of people, creatives, other people in the industry, clients, even some other unrelated industries, to see what they thought, felt, believed about generosity and the role of it in their careers and their professional lives. And I distilled down all the responses, and here are a few things that I found. So first of all, I heard a lot about what we can give. As a creative person, what's the substance, what's the stuff of when we work together and we share and we're generous with one another? What does that actually look like? And I'll click through these pretty quick. All right, the first one is attention, right? You can give someone just your attention. You can show care and consideration with what's going on with a person's life, much less what's going on with their career, okay? We can also give effort, right? This might be something like someone actually sharing a design with you and you kicking it up a notch, adding your twist to it, sharing some reference that helps somebody or inspires them in a particular direction, all sorts of ways that we can be giving with our effort. And hopefully this is happening without the person necessarily asking for it, right? That's a given. We can give our knowledge, right? Say maybe you are an expert at something like shooting, and you have a friend that has always wanted to learn how to run the Red camera, and you're going on a shoot, and you call this person out of the blue and say, hey, I know you want to learn this. Why don't you come to my shoot? And you can sort of see how the process works and learn the camera and so forth. We can also give connections, right? This is making introductions and so forth. You might be having coffee with your buddy that's a freelancer who you know that he should know somebody that you know, but they don't know each other, so you arrange an introduction purely because you want him to succeed and you want your client to succeed. And here's a big one, opportunity, okay? We can give opportunities to one another. And this is simply inviting others into opportunities that you have rather than keeping it all to yourself, right? So back to my informal poll, I also heard a lot from my research about the hows, okay? How is it that we give? And you'll see where this is all leading here in a sec. I think there's 5 of these as well. What I found was there were a few ways, the hows of what we give. Okay, the first one is the obvious one that we all live in every day. We can transact, and this is when it's equal consideration. You give something, you get something in return, fair market value, right? We do this all the time. Someone hires you to design a logo, you get a check, great. You can give to no one. I don't know if we think about this one very often, where if you just keep something to yourself, if you don't give it to yourself, you don't give it to anyone else, it's a waste, right? This is my least favorite one. You can give under duress. You can surrender. You can be forced to give something away by force or under duress, and that one's certainly never fun. You can give to yourself, and I call this protect, right? This is when you have something that you don't give away, you hoard it, you keep it for yourself. And then, this one's really curious. You can give something away without necessarily expecting a return. You're hoping for a return, but you're not sure, okay? And I call this investing. And, it might benefit you, it might not. But let's take a quick look at this one, because this one really stuck out in my research with my creatives. Of all the ways that a person can give and be generous, this one is really curious because it's the only one that involves risk. It involves uncertainty. It involves ambiguity. So by definition, when you invest, you're opening yourself up to possibilities, okay? So with this in mind, I'm going to propose a new definition for generosity within the context of creatives here, okay? And it goes something like this. Generosity, investing in someone despite the uncertainty of a return. So generosity requires the ability to see something that isn't there, okay? It requires you to see possibilities. Now, as creative people, we do this all the time, right? We see something that isn't there. Okay, what word does that remind us of that's really familiar to us creatives? Right, imagination, okay? We live and breathe this on a daily basis. So this should come easy to us. So let's go back to our earlier question. We theorized that success flows out of generosity rather than the other way around. So perhaps now we can answer or posit another theory. What prevents us from being generous? And I believe it's imagination. That a lack of imagination is what prevents people from being more generous, even though they know they should be or they want to be. And I think this is why some of the most creative minds in history that we all celebrate are people that are celebrated for their amazing imaginations. Because imagination fuels generosity, and generosity fuels success. So let's see where the rubber hits the road. The generosity paradox. All right, so here's what it does not look like. This is what I call the monopoly fantasy, okay? And where are you? Okay, you're this little green guy here in the middle, right? You are so cute and you're so special. In fact, I'm going to make you all shiny, okay? And you think to yourself, if I can just be the best or the fastest or the coolest or the most creative, I'll win. right? So in this scenario, it only exists in a world of very limited options and choices. For you to give, though, means you lose and somebody else wins in this zero-sum world. Now let me take you into reality. This is what I call the reality of infinite choices, okay? This is actually what we're all afraid of. There you are, right there. And damn it, you're not so shiny after all, right? And neither am I. And thanks to things like Google and cheap Adobe software and $1,000 cinema cameras, there's this whole pantheon of other people that are awesome and fast and the best and maybe shinier than you are. I know this is really painful to admit, and I struggle with this all the time myself, right? But this is the reality we live in. So what are we going to do about it? Are we going to put our heads down, put our nose to the grindstone, walk away to our ivory towers and become, just work harder? No, we're not going to do that. But our mission is to become better and faster and more awesome. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to prove the generosity paradox. And what that looks like is, I can tell you now, these colors, the little purple faces and the little green faces, the purple ones are protectors. The green ones are givers. That's the reason these colors are here. So, if you want to become better, faster, more awesome, which group do you want to belong to? You want to be a giver. You want to be giving away your attention, your effort, your knowledge, your expertise, your connections, your opportunities, because that is your admission ticket into this amazing community of super amazing, creative, generous people. So when this network becomes shinier and brighter and more awesome, guess what? You become shinier and brighter and more awesome right along with them. This is what I've observed. So you've made this journey from imagination to generosity to success, right? And you've proved the generosity paradox in this example here. A client of mine that's a very generous guy summed it up this way: you can be competitive and successful and generous all at the same time. What about the protectors, though? What happens to them? Well, here's what that study had to say. By always protecting ourselves against future uncertainties and misfortunes, we are formed in ways that make us more anxious about uncertainties and vulnerable to future misfortunes. In short, by failing to care for others, we do not properly take care of ourselves. So the paradox holds a warning that if you don't give, you lose. Which leads me to a phrase that a friend of mine coined, who's a creative director. He calls it prison eating. Do you remember in the classic jailbreak movies when the main character approaches one of the other prisoners to enlist his aid in getting out, and the guy's got his little bowl of food, and as he approaches him, what does that guy do with his food? He does this, right? Protects. So is that a picture of somebody that's open to possibilities and opportunities? Okay, so just say no to prison eating. Now, to the skeptics out there, is there a dark side to the generosity paradox? Yes, I'm not going to lie. There are going to be times when you give and you'll discover, wow, that was a little purple protector person out there. I gave, they took, that's it. And that can be super painful. And I know this firsthand, and I'm sure all of you have experienced it too. But I want to encourage you to fight the good fight, keep the faith, because the generosity paradox isn't just good ethics, it's good science. In closing, I want to share this thought. I was listening to Inside the Actors Studio, and Amy Adams had this to say, and it was a really beautiful quote. She said, "The great actors have a generosity of spirit to take you with them on their journey. It's transformative." Isn't that beautiful? I thought that was a super amazing quote. So I want to encourage you to allow great people to take you with them on their journey as you take others on your journey with you. So what I'm going to leave you with is my discovery of 20 years goes something like this. Successful people are not necessarily generous, but generous people are successful. And number two, to be generous, all it takes is imagination. And we as creative people have plenty of that. I've learned that generosity is a gift. It's like a seed that when you keep it, it dies. But when you share it, it grows. And it'll always come back to you in strange and uncertain ways. And although uncertainty isn't fun, here's what is certain. When you open up your imagination to be generous, you open yourself up to possibilities. You are properly taking care of yourself. You are growing. And as long as you're growing, you're unstoppable. So let's go out there and prove it. Thank you very much.